The music echoed softly through the grand living room of the Whitmore estate, a gentle somber rhythm dancing off the marble walls. Outside, the sun set over Lake Tahoe, casting golden streaks across the lake's surface. But inside, something far more extraordinary was unfolding. In the center of the room, a little girl named Emily, just 9 years old, sat in her sleek, custom-built wheelchair. Her long blonde hair shimmered as she clapped her hands to the beat. For the first time in 8 agonizing months, since the accident that had stolen the use of her legs, she was smiling, genuinely, fully, radiantly. Beside her moved Malik Carter. Tall, athletic, with a quiet elegance, his skin the shade of deep bronze and his eyes calm but alive. The 34-year-old man was hired just 3 weeks ago to drive. Nothing more. And yet, here he was, holding Emily's hand like it was made of glass, guiding her through a seated version of a samba step, gently twirling her around in place. His phone played music from a speaker on the mantel, filling the silence that had haunted the mansion since Emily's injury. Then the door slammed. What the hell is going on here? The music stopped. So did Emily's laughter. Ethan Whitmore stood frozen at the threshold, his 6'2" frame rigid, fists clenched at his sides. Billionaire. Widower. CEO of one of Silicon Valley's largest AI firms. And father. A father whose heart had been shattered, then locked away behind walls made of steel and guilt. "What do you think you're doing with my daughter?" he barked, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. Malik stepped back, hands raised, peaceful. "Sir, I can explain. You were hired to drive," Ethan snapped. "Not to entertain. Not to this." He jabbed a finger at the speaker. "Turn that off. Now." Emily's smile vanished. Her bottom lip trembled. But the music had already stopped. The silence that followed? Deafening. And in that frozen moment, as Malik turned to leave and Emily reached for him with pleading eyes, something happened. Something that would unravel Ethan's world, tear apart his beliefs, and force him to confront a truth money had never prepared him for. Because what he just destroyed might have been his daughter's only chance at healing. The next morning, the Whitmore estate was quieter than usual. Too quiet. The house staff moved about cautiously, as if afraid to disturb something fragile in the air. And in many ways, they were right. Emily hadn't come down for breakfast. She hadn't touched her sketchpad. She hadn't asked for her morning smoothie or her favorite peanut butter toast. She simply stayed in bed, staring at the ceiling. Ethan stood outside her bedroom door, tie knotted tight, briefcase in hand, ready for another high-stakes investor call. But something kept him from walking away. He knocked gently. "Emily, sweetie? Can I come in?" No answer. He cracked the door open. The curtains were drawn, casting long shadows across a room filled with stuffed animals and untouched books. She lay motionless under the covers, her wheelchair pushed slightly off to the side. Her eyes were open, but lifeless. "Hey," he said softly, walking in. "Want to go for a drive later? Just you and me." Still nothing. He sat on the edge of the bed, unsure of what to say. His daughter had always been a fighter, even after the accident. She didn't cry, didn't complain. But today, it was like someone had flipped a switch. "Emily, I know you're upset about what happened yesterday," he offered, trying to sound firm but loving. But that man overstepped. He wasn't qualified to. "Stop," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "You don't know what he was." Ethan froze. "He made me feel like I wasn't broken, like I was just different. And different was okay." Her eyes welled with tears, but she didn't blink them away. "He danced with me, Daddy. No one's ever danced with me since Mom." Her words hit Ethan like a gut punch. That night, Emily refused dinner. She turned her wheelchair toward the window and watched the driveway until the stars came out. Every time a car passed by, her eyes lit up, then dimmed again. Malik never returned. By the third day, she had stopped speaking altogether. The new therapist Ethan brought in tried games, art therapy, even puppet shows, but Emily wouldn't respond. She sat in silence, her back turned to everyone. Ethan watched from the doorway, guilt slowly creeping in. For all his money, all his resources, he couldn't buy back his daughter's smile. The mansion felt colder than ever. He didn't realize it yet, but in pushing Malik out, he had shut the door on the only person who had reached the girl he no longer knew how to comfort. Ethan Whitmore wasn't the type of man to second-guess himself. He built a tech empire from the ground up by trusting logic, cutting through emotion, and making ruthless decisions without flinching. But something about Malik Carter's departure gnawed at him. Not because of the argument, or even Emily's heartbreaking silence, but because the man hadn't reacted at all. No protest. No argument. No request for a second chance. Just calm. Too calm. 3 days after the incident, Ethan found himself in his home office before dawn, staring at Malik's employment file. A standard background check. Clean driving record. References from a private agency. But nothing beneath the surface. No social media footprint. No personal contacts listed. Just silence. He buzzed Olivia Grant, his personal assistant of 7 years. She picked up immediately. "I need a deep dive on our former driver," Ethan said. "Not the agency fluff. I want the real file." "Sir." She hesitated. "I thought you said." "I know what I said," he snapped, then softened. "Just dig, please." By noon, Olivia returned with a file. Thick. Digital records, scanned documents, citations. She handed over the tablet without a word. Ethan scrolled, and stopped cold. PhD in Pediatric Neurology. New York University, class of 2012. Postdoctorate fellowship in Paris. Specialization in neuroplasticity and trauma-based therapy. Former speaker at medical symposiums across Europe. Published in multiple journals. Fluent in 4 languages. There was even a clip of him on YouTube. Malik, dressed in a lab coat, speaking passionately about using music and movement to help children with motor disorders. The same movements he'd used with Emily. The same techniques no one else had bothered to try. Ethan set the tablet down, his hands trembling slightly. This man wasn't just qualified. He was overqualified. He turned to Olivia, stunned. "Why didn't anyone tell me this?" "You never asked for a full check," she said quietly. "The agency listed him as highly experienced with families. You assumed it meant as a driver." Ethan stood up, pacing. "Why would a man like this take a job driving my car?" "I don't know, sir. But I think we both know he wasn't just here for the paycheck." That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the scene in the living room, the music, the way Emily had laughed, the way Malik had held her hand like it was sacred. He'd misjudged the man. Badly. But something told him this went deeper than just a resume. Something about Malik Carter didn't add up. And he was going to find out exactly why. The Whitmore estate held secrets, some buried deep beneath years of silence, others hidden in plain sight. That evening, Ethan wandered into the library, a room he hadn't set foot in since Grace died. Her touch was still there, vases of dried lavender on the windowsill, her favorite leather armchair by the fireplace, a worn bookmark still tucked inside a Jane Austen novel on the end table. He poured himself a glass of bourbon and sat down, letting the fire crackle and fill the room with its soft hum. It was supposed to soothe him, but instead, it made him restless. He pulled open the bottom drawer of Grace's old desk, looking for, he wasn't sure what. Maybe closure. Maybe proof he hadn't failed her. What he found instead was a photo, wedged between the pages of a medical folder. It was worn, edges soft from time. In the image, Grace sat in a hospital bed, smiling, weakly, but genuinely. Beside her stood a tall man in a white coat. It was Malik. He looked younger, clean-shaven, but unmistakably the same man. His hand rested lightly on Grace's shoulder, his expression one of calm strength. Ethan flipped the photo over, heart racing. In Grace's handwriting, it read, Dr. Malik Carter, the only one who truly understood me. If anything ever happens, he's the one I trust with Emily." Ethan's hand trembled. His mind raced through memories, doctor's visits, vague references Grace made to exploring alternative options, conversations he'd tuned out or dismissed as anxiety. He grabbed the medical folder, flipping through charts and notes until he found it, a letter Grace had never sent. Dated just 6 months before her death. Addressed to him. "Ethan, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I know how much you love Emily, but love isn't always enough. You try to fix things, to control every outcome. But if Emily ever faces something that science can't solve, promise me you'll call Malik Carter. He doesn't just treat patients. He sees them. He saw me." Ethan leaned back in the chair, winded by the truth. The man he had fired, he wasn't just a gifted therapist. He wasn't just some mysterious stranger. He was part of Grace's plan. Chosen. Trusted. Embedded into their lives long before Ethan ever knew they'd need him. And now, he was gone. Ethan closed his eyes, the letter pressed against his chest. For the first time in years, he wasn't sure he was the smartest man in the room. And for the first time in his life, he wished he'd just listened. The next morning, Ethan sat alone in his home office, the blinds still drawn, the world outside a blur of muted light. The bourbon from the night before remained untouched on his desk. In front of him, his late wife's will glowed on a tablet screen, the digital document long forgotten in the shuffle of legal logistics and automated emails. He had never actually read it. The lawyers had summarized the basics after Grace's funeral: estate transfers, custody clauses, charitable donations. Ethan, numb with grief, had nodded through the process, signed what they told him to sign, and moved on. But now, he scrolled with purpose. Page after page, until he reached Section 19, Special Provisions for Emily Whitmore in the event of neurological trauma. His heart sank. In the event our daughter Emily experiences paralysis, neurological trauma, or any condition related to loss of motor function, I request that Dr. Malik Carter be consulted immediately. His methods may not be conventional, but they are based in compassion, deep understanding, and proven therapeutic approaches. I trust him with our child's healing, should I no longer be here to do so." Ethan rubbed his temple, as if the pressure might erase the words. But they stared back, clear and irrefutable. Grace had seen something coming. Maybe not the accident itself, but the fragility of life. The possibility that Emily, the light of their lives, might one day need more than what science could offer. More than what Ethan's calculated, control-based world could understand. He pulled up his phone records. No missed calls from Malik. No messages. The man had said nothing, not when he was hired, not when he was fired. No reminders. No appeals. He simply showed up when needed, and left without protest. Because he had already fulfilled his promise to Grace. Ethan leaned back in his chair, the air thick in his lungs. He had rejected the very person his wife had chosen. The man who had given Emily her first smile in months. The man who had walked into their lives not as a coincidence, but as a quiet answer to a mother's final prayer. In that moment, Ethan realized something devastating. This wasn't about a driver overstepping his boundaries. This was about a husband failing to honor the one request his wife made from beyond the grave. And if he didn't fix it soon, he might lose more than just his daughter's smile. He might lose her altogether. Ethan paced the floor of his office, the weight of Grace's words still heavy in his chest. For the first time in his adult life, he felt powerless, not from lack of resources, but from knowing he had misjudged something priceless. Someone priceless. And now, he had to confront that mistake head-on. He pulled out his phone, found Malik's number in the logs from the agency records, and hit dial. It rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Then came the voice, calm, measured, unmistakably Malik. "I figured you'd call," he said, without a trace of resentment. Ethan exhaled slowly. "We need to talk." There was a pause. Then, "I'll text you the address." 30 minutes later, Ethan pulled up outside a modest apartment complex in East Oakland. The contrast with his mansion in Lake Tahoe was jarring. No gates, no manicured lawns, just a cracked sidewalk and a rusted mailbox. Malik was already waiting on the porch, a cup of coffee in hand, as if he'd been expecting him all along. Ethan approached, uncertain. Malik gestured to the chair beside him. "You don't have to take your shoes off here," he said with a small smile. "I saw the will," Ethan said bluntly. "Grace trusted you." "I didn't." Malik nodded. "I know." Ethan shook his head. "Why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you tell me who you were?" "Because men like you don't hire former doctors to drive cars," Malik replied, his voice even. "You hire drivers. You needed someone invisible. Someone who wouldn't challenge your authority. So I let you see what you expected to see. That's manipulative." "It's survival," Malik said softly. "For people like me, sometimes the only way in is the back door." Ethan flinched. Malik continued, "Your wife reached out to me months before the accident. Emily had a genetic flag, nothing guaranteed, but Grace wanted a plan. She didn't want to wait for something to go wrong before preparing." "Why didn't she tell me?" "Because you would have called it emotional, irrational, unproven," Malik said without bitterness. "Grace knew you'd fight it. So she asked me to promise, if anything ever happened, I'd find a way to help Emily. No matter what." Ethan's voice cracked. "And you did. You helped her." "She hasn't smiled like that. Not since Grace." "I didn't do it for you," Malik replied, his gaze unwavering. "I did it for her. For Grace. And for Emily. Because I've seen what happens to kids who stop believing they're still whole." Ethan looked down, ashamed. "What do I have to do to fix this?" Malik didn't hesitate. "Start by admitting you don't have all the answers. And then we talk about what it really means to show up for your daughter." Back at the Whitmore estate, the mood had shifted from silence to something heavier, grief. But this time, it wasn't for a lost loved one. It was for a child who was still alive, but fading in spirit. Emily hadn't left her room in over a week. Meals went untouched. Therapy sessions were met with silence or tearful refusal. Her once bright eyes now stared blankly out the window, as if waiting for something, or someone, that might never return. The family pediatrician, Dr. Lee, made a special house call after receiving a concerned message from the staff. After a brief examination, she pulled Ethan aside in the hallway. "She's showing signs of psychological withdrawal," Dr. Lee said, her voice gentle but firm. "A kind of depression that isn't about sadness, it's about giving up. She doesn't want to engage because, to her, there's nothing left worth engaging for." Ethan felt the floor tilt under his feet. "I've hired the best," he said, almost defensively. "I brought in specialists, tried play therapy, art therapy. But they weren't the person she bonded with," Dr. Lee cut in. "Emily connected to someone who made her feel whole. And then that person vanished." Ethan nodded slowly, absorbing the truth. That evening, Olivia appeared in his office with something unexpected. A small USB drive. "She asked me to record this the day before Malik was let go," Olivia said quietly. "I didn't think much of it then. But now, I think you should see it." Ethan plugged the drive into his laptop. The video flickered to life. Emily sat in her wheelchair in the sunroom, arms raised gently as soft Brazilian music played in the background. Malik knelt beside her, guiding her movements with gentle cues and playful encouragement. Emily laughed. Not the polite giggle she gave to please adults, but real, unfiltered joy. And then, she said something that shattered Ethan. "Mr. Malik says even broken wings can fly. Just differently." Ethan watched the video 3 times in a row. He didn't cry, he couldn't. The guilt had settled too deep for tears now. But something inside him cracked open. This wasn't about hiring someone back. This was about restoring a connection that had given his daughter her first glimpse of life beyond limitation. He picked up his phone, hands steady now, and dialed the one person who still had the map to Emily's healing. "Malik," he said when the call was answered, "I don't want a second chance for me. I want it for her." The next morning, Ethan didn't send a car. He didn't schedule a call. He drove himself, something he hadn't done in years. The streets of East Oakland looked different through his eyes now. Not lesser, not unfamiliar, just honest, real. When he pulled up to Malik's building, he didn't know exactly what he would say. He only knew he couldn't leave until he'd said something. Malik was already on the stoop, reading a worn paperback, as if he'd known Ethan was coming. Again. Without a word, Malik stood and opened the screen door, gesturing toward the small living room inside. Ethan stepped in and sat down. No pleasantries. No coffee. Just silence between two men carrying different kinds of pain. "I owe you an apology," Ethan said finally, voice low. "Not just for firing you, but for everything that came before that." Malik folded his arms, waiting. "I assumed things about you. About your background, your role, your worth," Ethan continued. "You walked into my house to help my daughter, and I treated you like you didn't belong." A beat passed. "I did belong," Malik said evenly. "But I didn't need your permission to prove it." Ethan nodded, taking the hit without flinching. "Grace trusted you. She trusted you with the most important thing in her life. And I ignored that. I ignored her." Another pause. "I let my pride and my fear cloud everything." Emily was getting better, she was smiling, she was moving, and I still threw it away. Malik's expression softened, just slightly. "You were grieving. Grief twists people. Makes them protect what's left by pushing everything else away." "But it wasn't just grief," Ethan admitted. "It was control. Arrogance. And yeah, bias I didn't want to admit I had." That landed. Malik sat down across from him. "So what now?" he asked. "You want me to come back?" Ethan shook his head. "I want you to choose to come back. Not as a driver. Not as someone I give orders to. But as the man Grace believed in. The man who helped my daughter when no one else could." Malik studied him for a long moment, then asked, "Are you ready to be part of her healing this time? Not just pay for it, but actually show up?" Ethan's voice cracked. "Yes, I want to learn. From you. From her. From everything I've been too blind to see." A long silence passed between them. Then Malik stood up, extended his hand. "Then let's get your little girl dancing again." By the time Malik walked back into the Whitmore mansion, something had changed. Not the decor. Not the silence. But the air itself. It felt warmer, charged, like something had been waiting to breathe again. Emily was in the hallway when he arrived. Not in her bedroom. Not in her wheelchair. She was standing. Barefoot, gripping the wall with trembling fingers, sweat beading on her forehead. Her legs wobbled like saplings in the wind. But they were planted. She was up. Malik froze. "Hey, butterfly," he whispered. Emily's eyes welled up. "I didn't give up," she said breathlessly. "I promised you I wouldn't." Ethan was 2 steps behind, ready to catch her if she slipped. But he didn't rush in. For once, he held back. He watched. "Daddy helped me get to the hallway," Emily said proudly. "But I took the last 2 steps on my own." Malik approached slowly, kneeling in front of her. "I'm proud of you, Emily. But I need you to remember, walking is just one way to dance. You were already flying." She giggled. "Can I still dance with you?" He smiled. "Only if your dad joins us this time." Ethan let out a quiet laugh, the first honest one in weeks. "I don't know if I can keep up." "Then we'll go slow," Malik said, standing. "This time. Together." They moved into the sunroom, the same room from the video. Malik placed a Bluetooth speaker on the table and hit play. The somber rhythm filled the air again, warm and vibrant. Malik guided Emily's movements. Her arms swayed with the music. Her feet shuffled, small and imperfect, but determined. Ethan stepped in, unsure at first, then matching the rhythm. And there, in the middle of that once lifeless room, a little girl danced with her two favorite people, one by blood, one by bond. Tears ran freely, but no one wiped them away. They didn't need to. This wasn't about sadness. It was about becoming whole again. Later that night, as Malik packed up his therapy equipment, Ethan lingered by the doorway. "I didn't think it was possible," he said, "to see her like this." "You weren't supposed to do it alone," Malik replied. "Grace knew that. Emily knew that. Now, maybe you do too." Ethan nodded. Outside, the sky turned a soft lavender over Lake Tahoe. And in that light, the mansion no longer looked like a place of loss. It looked like home. 6 months later, the Whitmore mansion looked nothing like it used to. The polished marble floors still gleamed, and the chandelier still sparkled. But gone were the echoes of emptiness and quiet grief. In their place, music, laughter, and the soft hum of wheels across hardwood. The Fly Different project had taken flight. What started as a promise between a mother and a doctor had become a movement. Ethan, once obsessed with control and image, now stood at the front lines, not as a billionaire tech mogul, but as a father fueled by purpose. He and Malik co-founded the program as a non-profit therapy initiative for children with neurological trauma, blending movement, music, and emotional healing. It wasn't just therapy. It was community. It was magic. The sunroom became a studio. The guest house was converted into a rehab center equipped with adaptive tools, sensory rooms, and open dance spaces. Children arrived in wheelchairs, on crutches, or with tremors in their hands, but within weeks, they were tapping tambourines, spinning in their chairs, moving to rhythms they never thought belonged to them. Malik oversaw every session, customizing regimens based on each child's needs. He wasn't just a doctor in a lab coat. He was a mentor, a cheerleader, a steady hand when a child faltered. And Ethan? He learned how to step back and lean in where it mattered. He wasn't fixing anymore. He was participating. Donations started pouring in after a local news station aired a story on the transformation of the Whitmore estate. Families across the state, then across the country, reached out. Within months, Fly Different expanded to 3 more cities. But the heart of the project remained at Lake Tahoe, at the very place where a little girl once believed her story was over. Emily was now 10. She walked with pink crutches, decorated with glitter and tiny stickers that spelled out, "Fly." And every Saturday, she led the opening movement session with other children, spinning and laughing like she had been born for the stage. During one session, a new girl named Ava clung to the edge of her wheelchair, nervous and stiff. Emily leaned down, smiled, and whispered, "You don't have to walk to dance. You just have to feel the music in your chest." Ava smiled back, and clapped to the beat. Ethan watched from the doorway, a quiet pride swelling in his chest. This mansion, once a monument to success, was now something else entirely. A sanctuary. A launch pad. A place where butterflies who flew differently still soared. 2 years later, the auditorium at the Lake Tahoe Community Center was standing room only. Parents, doctors, local officials, and hundreds of guests gathered for the very first graduation ceremony of the Fly Different program. 23 children, all with physical or neurological challenges, had completed the full 2-year journey. And at the center of the stage stood the girl who started it all, Emily Whitmore. She walked out with her crutches, now taller, more confident, and took her place under the spotlight. She wore a soft lavender dress, her hair pulled back in a braid just like her mom used to do. But it wasn't just the walking that took everyone's breath away. It was the dancing. Emily performed a solo routine she had choreographed herself. A blend of expressive arms, rhythmic steps, and chair-based flow that seamlessly fused movement and music into something more than dance. It was freedom. After the final beat, the crowd stood in thunderous applause. Tears flowed from nearly every eye in the room. When the noise quieted, Emily stepped to the microphone. 2 years ago, she began, her voice steady. I thought my life was over. I thought I would never feel joy again, never feel strong again. I thought I couldn't dance, because I couldn't walk. She paused, eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on Malik, seated beside Ethan in the front row. But then someone came into my life who showed me a new way to move. A new way to be. He didn't tell me to be like everyone else. He helped me become myself. And my dad, he learned to dance too. With his heart. The audience chuckled softly, some through tears. I learned something, Emily continued. Being different doesn't make you less. It makes you unique. It makes you creative. It makes you powerful. Some butterflies fly differently, but they still fly. She stepped back, and the applause roared again. After the ceremony, reporters approached Ethan, shoving microphones into his face. But he didn't talk about his company, or his wealth. He didn't talk about AI or IPOs. He talked about prejudice. I almost lost my daughter, he said simply, because I judged a brilliant man by the color of his skin, by the job title he held, by what I assumed he was capable of. I almost cost her her joy, because I couldn't see past my own pride. He looked toward Malik. I learned that healing takes more than money. It takes humility. And sometimes, the best medicine is listening. Fly Different now serves over 300 families a year, and Malik has published his methodology free of charge for any doctor around the world to use. But its greatest success isn't measured in steps taken, it's in hearts opened. And in a world so eager to label people by what they can't do, Fly Different stands as a reminder. We all deserve to be seen for how we rise. Even, especially, when we fly differently.